I believe in having 1 and 2 being complete difference makers. And I am a big believer in a 1A and a 1B, however you look at it. And then you have a 3 who can be good and a 4 who can be good. But to sit there and think, I'm not going to spend my money on a 1 and a 2, which can be game breakers and playmakers, that's not how I personally believe teams should be built.
Welcome to another edition of the SumerSports Show. Lindsay Rhodes and Thomas Dimitroff back with you again. Getting ready for week 1, Thomas. It's here. There are going to be games played in a mere matter of hours now, days, just a couple of days. How excited are we? I'm gauging the temperature in the room. You don't look excited. I'd like more excitement. I'd like you to match my excitement. We've got football games coming up.
Look, I am wildly excited. I was spending a lot of time this weekend, as you know, watching a lot of NCAA. It got me propped up a little bit and 100% excited. Look, we're going to talk, as you know, about the topic we're going to talk about. And I love that topic because I think it is an important, extremely important part of team building. I'll leave you with that.
Such a tease about the topic that we're going to talk about. It is wide receiver contracts. And yes, there is lots to talk about in that regard. Particularly, I mean, from a news cycle standpoint, Ja'Marr Chase, suddenly the holdout that is kind of the last one standing, it would appear, and questions abounding about whether or not he will be on the field on Sunday. He wants an extension. He hasn't practiced all training camp. He is still not. Look, you would know better than me. My read of this, sitting where I sit, is install is tomorrow. They're going to get this done. Maybe this will be outdated by the time that the podcast even drops, because I feel like this has to be a matter of minutes. Don't you feel like they must feel like the clock is ticking and they want to get him on board prior to tomorrow?
I think they've been thinking the clock has been ticking for a while. Yeah, the general manager, their owner, Mr. Brown, has been very outspoken that he does, in fact, want to get this done. Everyone wants to get this done. Head coach, Duke Tobin, the entire staff. Look, you want your people in place going into that first, like you mentioned, install. There's nothing more uncertain and unnerving when your team isn't together, right? And as a team builder, you're always thinking, even though you have to answer to your owner, you're thinking, let's get the damn thing done. I don't care if it's a few $1 million more. Let's get it done. It is outrageously important.
So all of the other wide receivers have signed, right? There were a bunch that got new deals this offseason, and we'll talk about them. But CD signed his last week. And so any outstanding information that you might need in order to get this Ja'Marr Chase deal done, let's say it's Chase's camp saying, we're waiting until everyone, we're going to be the last one. We're going to up them by at least $1. We're going to be the highest paid wide receiver come this season. That happened a week ago. What might the holdup be?
Remember, there are two parties here. Everyone wants to think, okay, the team needs to get this done. This is BS, et cetera, whatever the banter is out there. But again, you have an agent and you have a player and you have that side of the discussion quietly, which we never try to air our dirty laundry as general managers, right? And as teams. And yet inside, a lot of times there are some issues that you're dealing with, or many times, with the agent and the player and the game playing. That's just the way it is. It is business. Everyone understands that. But you just have to understand as an outsider that there could be myriad issues that you're dealing with. It's not just the APY. It's not just the 3-year cash. There could be other elements that you're dealing with. And look, as we said, Mr. Brown has mentioned that he wants to get this done. That is a known fact. The guy is unbelievably talented. We know where Chase is on the line. I personally would pay him $1 more than anyone else right now, the way it is, if not more, of course, and we can talk about that.
Yeah. That's so 35 a year is the highest average per year. That's Justin Jefferson. CeeDee Lamb came in just under that at 34 per. No doubt that this is in your mind, probably, right? That this is going to come in just ahead of Justin Jefferson.
That's what I'm thinking. He warrants it. These guys are all fantastic receivers. I'm sitting there choking back a little bit here, looking at our deal with Julio back when it was $22 million, and looking at this group. It's unbelievable when you look at the top 10 or 12, looking at there's some very talented players in there, but it's amazing how it's changed. We know that. And you look at Ja'Marr Chase and you think about how he runs up and down the field, stop, start. Everything that is positive about this guy is what you want in that number one receiver. to build along the way with, again, they have T. Higgins. I mean, I'm really excited for this team offensively, right? Get everything rolling, get your quarterback healthy, and just rip this around the field and tear it up with these guys. But of course, you have to get Jamar on the field.
Yeah, and they brought in Jermaine Burton in the offseason, so they have a little bit of maneuverability with T. Higgins, pushing that one toward the future. Let's go back to your Julio Jones experience, because that kind of sets the table here. You absolutely know what it's like to be in that room trying to figure out whether or not to pay a wide receiver top dollar and what that does to your build. And so what are some of the, I mean, at this point, I think we all agree, and you have said that, they're going to pay Jamar Chase. In this particular case, it's an interesting situation because they also have the highest paid quarterback in the NFL in terms of APY. Walk me through this as somebody who's been in this seat before, trying to weigh pros and cons. What are they?
Well, look, this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier. You have a lot going on within that conversation. It's not just APY, it's not just 3-year. There are elements of it. I mean, these players could be coming in talking about, how am I going to be paid? And this came up, and it was public when Julio Jones was discussing the idea, is Matt Ryan really exponentially more valuable than I am? I don't care the position, or he didn't care the position or not. It was a big discussion, right? How how far off is that? So a guy like Jamar Chase who comes in and is thinking, "Hey, I am a game breaker, a playmaker beyond extraordinary, et cetera, et cetera. And my quarterback is making what he's making at 55. And do I deserve 35? Do I deserve, as Jamar Chase, 36, 37 or more?" Sometimes there can be discussions like that. I'm not saying that's happening, but remember, those types of conversations happen when you have very competitive football players who know their worth to not only the team, they know their worth to the production of the team, they know their worth to the evolution of the quarterback within the scheme. There are so many elements there that have the players, in this case, receivers, wondering what the next steps are and what truly is the fair number. So all I'm saying is, not projecting, not foreshadowing in the sense of knowing what's going on within the building. But Lindsay, understand, it is not just cut and dry on numbers. There is a lot of other discussion there that has to be, has to be worked through for sure.
Well, and also, even with regard to the numbers, we all know this, that there will be a headline put out about every new deal saying it's like, it's the highest ever in this, and it could be guaranteed money, it could be total, it could be whatever. And then you have to actually look at the deal and figure out what it is year by year, and if there are any inflated cap numbers in the later, years of the deal that person's never actually going to see. And so oftentimes the headlines about what certain deals are not actually reflective of what the deal is. In this case, do you think that it likely will be that in a wide receiver, a top wide receiver of a person of his age, he's likely to play out the whole contract, and so whatever number comes out is likely to be a number that he actually sees and is paid?
Oh, I think so. I think my personal feeling is, but you never know, is that he'll stay through his contract, and that's the kind of organization that will work it hard. There's a loyalty there. There's a focus there with that organization, albeit polarizing for some in the league, right? Just because their approach might be different than most teams. They're going to get it done. They have some really good, strong personnel people there. I mentioned his name before. When I think about Duke Tobin and the way that he team builds there at Cincinnati, and we start talking about the necessary side, and we haven't gotten into this, I'm sure you're going to toss it at me, to put this kind of money into a quarterback and into a receiver, it's huge. We did the same thing in Atlanta back in the day with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. We had Roddy White as well. We had a number of other offensive tools. I'm a big believer in making sure that offense is stout as far as production. They have to rip it up versus, in the pass game, they have to do it in the run game. They have to mix it up with creativity. And when you have athletes like the Bengals have, both at quarterback and of course at the receiver position, it can be a difference maker. It can be something that I think is very worth it. Some people would argue, why don't you just kind of water it down a little bit, have 2 or 3 receivers that are good, not great, and just go from there. Look, I believe in having 1 and 2 being complete difference makers, and I am a big believer in a 1A and a 1B, however you look at it. And then you have a 3 who can be good, and a 4 who can be good. But to sit there and think, I'm not going to spend my money on a 1 and a 2, which can be game breakers and playmakers, that's not how I personally believe teams should be built. That's my opinion.
Thomas, I couldn't agree more. And I think what you're saying there about the second wide receiver is a key point that gets lost in the wash a lot of times. I like to say that your wide receiver one is only as good as your wide receiver two, right? Like you do need both of those pieces, and certainly the Bengals do have that. I want to go a little bit deeper on some of the things that you said there in terms of what positions you would prioritize. There have been a lot of conversations in the last few years about positional value, and part of the running back conversation is that the positional value is very, very low, and that's why they're not
Mhm.
getting paid. And so that leads to a lot of conversations about that. But let's say you are a general manager and you are deciding where to allocate your resources, and it's a vacuum. Let's say you're not just handed a team and your best player. If you're building, what ideally do you want to allocate your resources to?
Well, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before. If I'm answering your question correctly, I'm a big believer in pillar positions, right? The pillar positions within the offense and the defense are where you should be spending your money. And again, in my opinion, people have different approaches to it. I understand. Some people think you can get certain positions at a better value. No question. There's data out there on that. There's the other side of it, right? How that person affects the locker room, how it affects the intelligence of the team and themselves, how they what their morale element is. There is a lot of that. But I mean, categorically, you're spending money on the quarterback. In my mind, you're spending money on a receiver, you're spending money on a left tackle. You need to make sure that you are set that way. On the flip side, on the defensive side, obviously you need your pass rusher. You need a marquee pass rusher, which, by the way, I raised my hand. We never really accomplished that at Atlanta. That's another time, another place conversation.
You tried.
We always thought we were. We always thought we did. We had some, some elements of it, and then they died down. So that's another conversation. I'm a big believer in a marquee corner, and or two. So you're spreading it around. I get it, and then you need to be smart about the rest of your offensive line and your defensive line. We know how important that is. I just want to make sure that you have the firepower. I would want to make sure that we had the firepower as a team builder to make sure people are always trying to play catch up with you, right? Not only, you can have some unbelievably athletic O linemen, which is important, D linemen, pass rushers, but on the periphery, I think it's really important, right? You mentioned a minute ago, 1 and 2 is very important. 2 might make number 1 as a receiver. 2 and 1 also open things up for 1 or 2, depending on it, right? You send a cat deep who can fly and tear it off the top end, and you do some stuff unbelievably creative underneath, you're creating big pockets of gains, not only with your number 2 receiver, but your number 3 that we're not really talking about, or 2, as a very bona fide tight end out there, Lindsay. All of a sudden, you have tools all over the place on the offensive side, and you're hitting it. You're getting creative. You're moving the ball around, which is obviously very important. So I just think it's so important when you step back and you start allocating your money, you monitor it, no question about it. Certain years you may be higher, in other areas not. Depending, of course, contingent on the age. You may have a youthful team on the defense where you can spend more money on your offense, or vice versa, right? It's always being ahead. Most people have to understand that when you're building a team, you're not just looking at year 1 and 2. You are looking at year 2 and 3. And as much as we don't like to admit it, sometimes we are looking at 4, as long as our owners
Yeah.
are giving us the wherewithal and the confidence that 4 is going to still be there within our grasp. If our owners hanging it over our heads that we have 1.5 years left, that's a whole different story.
Are there specific rosters that are better suited to pay a top of market wide receiver? And I ask this with like the Chiefs in mind. For instance, when Tyreek Hill wanted a new deal, they sent him packing to the Dolphins. And I think in a lot of ways, well, I mean, obviously they were proven right, right? Like that they could get it done without him, and that they didn't need that high end talent because Patrick Mahomes could elevate the play of slightly more average wide receivers. And so I'm wondering if, we saw them pass on doing it. We saw the Titans pass a few years back. My guess is that they would like that take back to a degree with the AJ Brown deal. But there are certain rosters that choose not to. And what goes into, you think, making that calculation from a front office standpoint about whether or not you are a team that can support a wide receiver that's paid in this manner versus someone that wants to, trade him away or send him to free agency? That's unlikely to happen, something like that.
Well, obviously, the most obvious situation is when you're a team that doesn't have the supporting cast. You're not just going to win all types of games, and you're not going to run roughshod over people, over defenses, because you have one marquee receiver. You better have the supporting cast. You better have of course, the quarterback to move the ball around. You better have the offensive line to protect your quarterback so you can get the damn ball to this receiver that you're paying all of this money to. When you look at some of the data over the last 10, and Stopsky may be able to pull it up for us, but there are a lot of receivers that signed those big time contracts that were coming back the year that they signed and beyond with very middling type records, right? We've all had them, right? Just because you sign that receiver doesn't mean you're coming back to be knocking on the door as a championship organization. You have to grow. I'm just, again, a believer, if you have the right pieces to support an evolving and up and coming quarterback, and you can move the ball around to 2, 3, 4 different places with a good, solid running back as well, then I think that wide receiver excels more. You can't just come in my mind, and sell the farm on one receiver and everyone else is solid, right? They're all adequate. They're all fives as we talk about, our grading scale. There's no sixes and sevens in there complementing. Then I think you're in a tough spot. I think at that point, I think you're shooting some blanks with your team building.
Let's say from a team building standpoint, because the Commanders come to mind right now because they were mentioned a lot in this whole Brandon Aiyuk, will he stay or will he go back and forth that happened this offseason. A team like the Commanders, I don't think really, they're not a team that strikes me as having an obvious roster right now that is set up to be immediately competitive. But you could make the argument that in their case, I suppose it could be worthwhile to pay a top of market wide receiver because you need to develop Jaden Daniels. You need to give him somebody consistent to throw the ball to. And in that case, you would have him and you would have Terry McLaurin, right? Like, is there a specific build on the lower end where it makes sense like that? Maybe with a young or quarterback that you need to get a read on and or to set up to succeed in some way?
Look, Lindsay, I love that idea. And I am a big believer in providing that quarterback with all you need to help him hit stride right away. I am a right away person, again, in the not for long league that it is today. That said, I would rather personally, you have McLaurin, who we know is a very good receiver. I would rather invest in a dynamite tight end. Again, I've mentioned this before, high percentage shot cat who's going to do some really special things, then keep growing. And then, maybe next year you come back in and you sprinkle in, that's the wrong word with a big time receiver. You factor in that receiver who's going to make Jaden Daniels that much better. And then you have a tight end receiver. You have get your running game going. You have Terry McLaurin. Like that's a good way to build. When you put the receivers out there, pressure's coming in with an offensive line that they're trying to build and work with their, in Washington. Maybe they're not able to get that ball down the field that they want. They would have a lot easier time doing that underneath to the tight end position. That's one of the thoughts that I've had.
You just got me so excited because I just on the fantasy podcast that I do today made a bold prediction that Ben Sinnott would be a top 12 tight end this year. And so I feel like maybe I might be onto something there.
I like it. No, look, we all know how important that is. I mean, again, bringing it back to Atlanta for a minute, I mean, to have Tony Gonzalez and what he did for Matt Ryan at so many levels, it opened up so many more things. Again, when we did bring on Julio, but when we had Roddy White and we had Mohamed Sanu, like we had some people there that were really good receivers, but that tight end position and Tony Gonzalez, what he did for us because he was so special, he took it to another level with our offense.
Let's talk about another wide receiver that just got paid last week. And the conversation surrounding him, I think, was very different than the one that we're having about Jamar Chase and even CD and Justin Jefferson. It was like, pay him. Obviously, you're going to pay him. This is going to get done. With Aiyuk, the conversation was very different. It was a little bit more, I think people are on different pages with regard to what he is worth and where he ranks in terms of the good wide receivers. I heard over and over and over again, he's very good, but he's not elite. There are some numbers that would suggest that maybe he is elite. And you could also make the argument that the numbers are inflated because he's in the offense that he's in. How do you go about viewing Brandon Aiyuk and trying to figure out how much he is worth under the circumstances?
All right. First of all, let me say, like Brandon Ayuk we were talking about that grading scale. You're going to bring it up one day for the fans to see, of course, the listeners. That between the 7 and the 8, the very
Mhm.
good and the excellent, he has a lot of traits that are excellent. He has other traits that are very good. I know that's being really particular, but it is a way we evaluate, right? I think this player has elements of his game that are excellent elements, and I think there are other parts of his game that are very good. And that is someone that feeds into a head coach who knows his offense very well, head coach that knows how he's going to use his talent. Right? I say that all the time about the way that Kyle Shanahan runs his offense, and we had an opportunity to see him here in Atlanta. I've told people point blank time and again. And I'm sure the people over at San Francisco aren't going to want to hear this. He is one of the coaches in my mind that I would pay with draft picks to come to my team if I were ever to get back into a situation, just because I believe, as much as I know he hasn't pulled off that Super Bowl win, he's got an unbelievable brain per his offense and how he's going to approach things and utilizing the talent. His dad did the same thing with running backs, right? Kicked effing ass on it the way that I mean, back in the day that he did with his running backs. So I love how the Shanahan family are able to dig in and do that. So what they're doing with, Brandon Ayuk, who again, I think is a very good / excellent receiver, is they are going to get him the ball. Everything he does for that team, I think is right where they need him to be for the system that they're playing. Back to factoring in Deebo Samuel, wide back, all that he does. He helps Ayuk be who he can be. Was I surprised it took this long? There's no question I was. There are many reasons now. When people start talking about, was Denver the third group in there? The whole idea, would they have traded away? Would they have moved on from Brandon Ayuk if they found a bona fide receiver to replace him? We do go through that as team builders, and everyone needs to know that. There are a lot of elements. There are some people that are disappointed that the deal wasn't done, like the Jefferson deal early. I get that. That's an easy way to look at it. But there's also the other way. Let's see if there's someone else out there. Let's see how this plays out. Let's hold off a little bit and see if any other deals rise to the occasion that are going to better us. There didn't seem like there was a major rush. This guy is tried and true. He's a tough guy who's going to work hard. He's very, very competitive. I'm sure when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan sat down to talk about this process, they said, we have a drop dead date. I've also used the line, I don't know if I've used it with you. There's also a puke point in this whole thing, right? And the puke point is we're going to go up to this spot and spend this money. We're not going beyond. And that puke point not only has to do with that, but it has to do with how long that player needs to be on the team before you are sick because you are now paying someone who is declining. So there are so many factors involved in this.
I mean, that team specifically feels like they're in a tougher position than a lot of other teams would be trying to get. It might be like, hey, we love you. We would love to pay you this. We cannot because of all of the other people on that roster that are making 20 plus a year, right? Like most teams don't
Right.
have that many guys. Like look at the guys on this team that are all getting paid. They have so many. You were already, when we were talking, we got Brandon Ayuk wrapped up and now it's on to Trent Williams and like the next problem that they have to deal with there because they have so many high-end guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, they're putting together a team that is, again, some people are saying they're aging. I don't even know if you run the numbers right now where their age factor is. Something came out recently on that, and I understand that's something you have to keep an eye on. Sometimes, though, when you look at the age, it might be the difference between 26.5 and 26.9, right? So let's keep that in perspective. They have a very talented football team. John Lynch, the way that he's putting that team together, along with a head coach who is categorically clear on what he wants, which, by the way, listeners and everyone else out there, if you have a head coach who's going to be very honest with what he wants and you are very clear, I'm saying like lucidly approach how you're putting together your team and understand, then you have a fighting chance to be one of the top rosters out there and you can take everyone, to the cleaners, so to speak. And I think this team has the ability to do that. How long they can do it right now is a different story because there's a lot of money, of course, put into this roster.
Brandon Aiyuk didn't quite get to the top of the market, as most players who are top tier tend to just be like, it's next one up gets paid the most, regardless of whether or not you're better than the next one. He didn't quite get there. So that says something, I think, to a degree about the way that he is viewed, and the fact that they didn't necessarily think that he was on the level of Justin Jefferson or even CD Lamb, who got 5 and 4 more per year. Do you think that that is an accurate read? He got 30 million. I mean, nobody's like playing small violins for him or anything like that. He's going to be just fine. But does it tell
Yeah, I
us
think it's
how he's viewed in general?
I think it's a good place for him to land again. I think he is not he's not one of those guys that was truly battling, as we know from the results, up in that 35 range. Um, and yet again, he is an excellent football player out there that's going to be a difference maker for that team. So I think in the end, San Francisco looks at that like, look, we did our job, we stepped up. You're going to step up now, and this is the right place for him to be. Is he a little underrated? I do believe he is at times, not reflective necessarily of the money, but some of the banter out there, like, oh, we're
Yeah.
stretching it here. I think he comes through in the clutch. And I think now he settles in. He doesn't have to worry about this anymore. He's set for posterity, of course. We get that. He's got a lot of money coming in, and now he can concentrate on helping them hopefully get back to the Super Bowl.
You mentioned age being something that people are keeping in mind. So Brandon Ayuk is now tied with Tyreek Hill in terms of APY. Tyreek goes to the Dolphins and says, you know what? I need more because I'm the best wide receiver in the league. And now too many people are ahead of me and I'd like to rework this, but he's 30 years old. The point I guess that I want to get to here is not so much the minutia of whether or not he's worth it or anything like that. At this very moment, I think nobody would argue that he's not. The issue here is that he's 30. And so now you start, and that's why I brought this up, because now you start thinking about cliff years and how
Of course.
much more time does this person have, and you don't want to pay for what they have been to you. It's not like a post reward, right? Like, you want to pay them the proper amount in the future when they're doing something for you. You want to nail that number. And so there's a bigger risk once you do get up there in age that we might start seeing a decline at the position. I think 30 was exactly the year, since we brought up Julio. I want to say that was the year that Julio kind of started to get injured a lot and his production started to decline as a result. So that's something that's got to be on, any front offices on their radar when they're negotiating. They want to say, like, yes, at this very moment, you are very, very good, but I don't know that I want to pay into the future for that. And you got to
No,
navigate that.
that is on your mind. There's no question it's on your mind. Now you'll be monitoring how your player has been up to that point. If someone has a penchant or a history of yanking hamstrings, well, then that's something you have to be very aware of, that it's just only going to get probably more prevalent as you age. I mean, to step back on that was on our mind. I look on it and I say, I would never do anything different with Julio Jones over all those years of contracts, except for that last one. We still signed him for $22 million. It was the biggest contract in the history of the world, so to speak. I'm being a little bit sarcastic there, but it was. But very quickly, people started passing him by. We paid him a lot because we believed that it warranted it. But I ultimately, because it was my choice to do this, we extended there. And then obviously there were issues for being on the field and hamstring pulls. This was when his contract was done. And then when he moved on to other teams, right, it ended up being an issue. I mean, I love watching this guy play, of course, right? His speed, explosiveness, his ability to turn up things upside down. That's what you're looking for in a receiver. Could be one, could be two, could be one A, one B. I always wanted a bigger receiver in there mixed with a guy that was 6 feet or even lower. But when you have someone like that can turn it upside down, it sort of negates some of the need to make sure you're looking for a 6'2" receiver, because, I mean, Tyreek Hill is special.
Yeah, he is. Whew, that speed. And he's special for that specific offense too, that clearly prioritizes speed with all the motion and stuff like that. So he's perfect for that specific team. Justin Jefferson, perfect in a lot of different ways. Is he still worth it if Darnold isn't good enough? Like when they sign him, they don't really know what the quarterback situation looks like. And now JJ McCarthy, they don't even necessarily have him to build with for a year. And so do they start getting a little bit nervous about the fact that they have signed him to that deal at that point?
Categorically, Justin Jefferson is worth the money that he has been paid in my mind. And I mean, I don't want to speak out of both sides of my mouth because Sam Darnold, that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, right, Lindsay? I mean, where that quarterback is going to be playing, what Justin Jefferson did with Kirk Cousins as he was healthy, right? I mean, we all think Kirk Cousins is good, right? He's a good quarterback. He has never been rated as being a top 5 quarterback, but they did a great job with him. He's a fantastic guy and he operates very well. And that receiver, Justin Jefferson, he would thrive in that situation. So if Sam can come in and do his deal, that's great. Were they really planning on McCarthy coming in there, and turning it upside down this year? No, but I do believe they were planning on utilizing a receiver this talented underneath, wherever they could get him the ball to open it up, high percentage shots to him. He can create after the catch, of course, as he does. This is one of those situations I wouldn't feel bad about. If anything, I think he's going to bail out that team who's in a quarterback bind.
It's again, not to bring fantasy into the conversation again, but this was one of the bigger fantasy questions this offseason was should I be afraid of drafting him in the first round because of the quarterback situation? Will there be a drop off in play? And my favorite stat of the whole offseason is that in the 5 games that he played last year, Justin Jefferson, without Kirk Cousins, and we know the quarterbacks he played with, and there were 3 of them in 5 games, which tells you everything you need to know. We're talking Nick Mullins, we're talking Josh Dobbs. He still averaged, and again, fantasy stat, 18.6 fantasy points, which would have made him wide receiver 5 on the year. So I feel like there's so much evidence that this guy can get it done no matter what. And is that maybe the beginning way that you start to define who is elite and who's not? Like the guy that really will elevate under any circumstance. You're that wide receiver who will lift all tides.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. There's no question. That's what makes it even feel like this is more worthwhile. What I was trying to say earlier when I was alluding to the fact, if you don't have a bona fide quarterback, whatever that definition is, if you have a middling quarterback, if you have a situation like maybe the Falcons had last year with Desmond Ridder, right? And you have receivers like that, are you truly going to reap the benefits? I don't believe so. But I'm not saying, I mean, look, we'll see, right? We'll see what Minnesota's dealing with Sam Darnold. Where is he in that line, right? I don't know. I'll ask you this from your perspective. Is he a top 20 quarterback? Is he a 25 to 32? Is he in the mid-teens when he's operational?
I don't know. My read on him, and I am part of the Sam Darnold hive, and there's a group of us out there that are just more than anything confident in saying that we have never seen him in a good situation. And I think at the very least that the fact that he hasn't been able to blow us out of the water and answer any outstanding questions we might have about what he can do in the NFL in that situation probably means that he's not the next Patrick Mahomes, right? Like he's not a truck versus a trailer in that conversation, but I don't yet know that he's not good enough because I just don't think he's had an opportunity. I don't think he's been in a good ecosystem. And I think he's the type of quarterback who might be good enough to be a starter in the NFL in a better situation. I'm not convinced that he won't be fine in Minnesota this year.
You're going to be back on your heels here. I think the fantasy take the bag and run. Look, it is one of those situations. They need to just go with it, right? This guy is a top-notch, great receiver, and he's going to turn it upside down in my mind. Don't look back, fantasy people. Roll with this guy.
Do you think that Sam Darnold, what is your take on him? Because this is a very controversial topic. People still roll their eyes at people like me who are like, I don't know, man. Give him a good O-line. Give him you're not going to like this, but, give him some really competent coaching. Give him some, I mean, in some cases, wide receivers. He had DJ Moore in Carolina, but not all the other things. And so how much do you think that matters in terms of quarterback play?
I'm a huge believer in making sure that you know your talent, right? As a coaching staff, to your point, right? And you have to be mindful. You have to be creative. You have to make sure now that you're not having, again, a young guy that they were thinking about possibly going in with. I mean, Sam's had some struggles over the years. We get that. I mean, what was their plan when they brought him in? I mean, that's Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, that's what he wanted to do, right? He was going to bring in a veteran quarterback to help the transition with the quarterback that they were going to draft, of course, when they decided to get rid of Kirk Cousins. We can look at this. This is a whole topic of conversation with the Vikings, right? I've said this the other day. Very competent staff, very, very good scouting department. They provide a lot of great personnel information to Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who is a very smart man. That's important. But in the end, it's going to come down to making sure that the coaches are working well, have the right game plan, have the right scheme set up to make sure that Sam Darnold will thrive as much as he can. Is their offensive line as good as they need it to be to protect? Because again, there are some talented players on that team. We know it, right? I mean, we know what they can do there. And with a receiver like that, you're hoping that this quarterback can be at least, I don't know, 20 to 15, 15 to 20, right? You're hoping.
Yeah. Yep.
And we'll see how it is. I mean, he's got so many intangibles about him and so much natural ability about him, I think, to play much better than he has over the years. Time will tell. That didn't answer your question because that feels like a fence answer. But
I don't know. I don't know if you're on Team Darnold or not, but that's okay. You don't have to come down.
What I want to know is,
you don't have to join the hive.
How can you be on Team Darnold, right? Like, do you have stats right now that you could present that would say,
No.
Thomas? That's what I don't know. You think about everything that he is, and you want to pull for him, but history states.
Yeah, it's just, I'm a big believer in ecosystem for quarterbacks who are not the absolute like automatic Hall of Fame quarterback talent, right? Like there are certainly some quarterbacks that can overcome environments. I think we all could point to who those people are. But I also think that there are some good enough quarterbacks who have long careers and we don't talk about them like they're trash or anything like that because they went into good environments and they didn't have to be things that they're not. They didn't have to play, like their weaknesses weren't highlighted on a regular basis, or like Sam with the turnovers. I mean, who knows if that's not a little bit Josh Allen where it's like, man, I got to make a play. Like nothing's happening here. And so I'm going to push it. I'm going to throw it into a tight window because if it works, then we have a touchdown. And if not, I look bad. And I mean, there's a bunch of different things here. I think I'm not pointing to any specific numbers. I'm just saying like Derek Carr, my buddy from NFL Network, I'm not saying that he would have been the best quarterback ever, but I'm just saying he could have had a better career than he did had he not gone to a Texans team that did not have an O-line, and so he wasn't getting, I mean, he spent that whole season on his back. So how do we know, and then the confidence and the intangibles that go with developing a quarterback and how important those first few years are. And I think also for people like general managers who are like, man, I'm on a tight leash. Like people don't think you're good anymore. I can't trot you out here. You're not popular. Like, and I'm not, and I also haven't seen it. So there's no evidence here to back me up. I just think that sometimes people get thrown away and understandably so, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't have done it. They just didn't because they were in a bad situation. And I think Sam fits that bill for me.
That's right. No, you're exactly right. I mean, there are quarterbacks out there over the years who just haven't gotten the not fair shake, but just things haven't been played, haven't played out. To your point on, on your buddy Carr and other quarterbacks out there. I mean, even Sam Darnold in this situation. I mean, how might it have played out different if he were to be involved with a different team? Of course, no one knows. No one's going to feel sorry for them because believe me, they've made a lot of money, right? In the spirit of the NFL, life has gone good. There are some great guys that in the media right now that never really excelled as we had thought they were. Really good guys, really smart guys that could probably run football teams if they were in it. They decided to go into the media. You know them. We don't even need to mention names, but they just did not get a chance as a quarterback to thrive in this league. So,
yep. CeeDee Lamb, can you maybe make me feel better about the fact that it took as long as it did to get him paid?
Well, I mean, you continue to hear all that banter out there that, the owner there / general manager, right? I mean, we know his approach to everything, and his approach is about making sure that he's marketing properly. They're going to be smart about how they put things together from the standpoint of they're going to get the deal done eventually. The fact that CeeDee, who I think is unbelievably talented, and of course they do, right? Talk about a guy who route runs, the guy who can catch at all levels, the guy who can tear it off the top. He can create after he catches. I mean, he is the bona fide, right up there in my mind with Jamar Chase. those are guys, and Justin Jefferson, like those are amazing football players. In my mind, I always thought as I was watching this, they knew that they were going to pay him. To your point, why this long? Why was it? I'm saying there are people that are arguing it because it was like, we want when you listen to Mike Florio talk about it, right? Mike's saying this is all about, Jerry Jones focusing on the team. And every day they wake up, there's discussion about, CeeDee Lamb not signing. So it's great marketing. I don't necessarily, respectfully to Mike, believe that was all of it. I believe that they knew that they could get it done and they were going to get it done. They also had a point where they were going to go and finally, they had a number that they were going to figure on and they were just waiting. They knew they were going to get it done. Why do that? I really can't answer that question. They did it and they got it done. They got it done at the right time. So they're going in, not facing the situation that Cincinnati is, right? In their mind, back to remember, you get management, an owner in this situation, which is a little different than most. You sit down with your head coach and you map this out, right? For the most part. Again, I can't answer for the Dallas Cowboys because they're a little different, but you get and you focus on what is our drop dead timeline on this. Let's wait. Let's see what pans out. Let's see something crazy because you never know. We've seen in the NFL as a team builder, sometimes you're waiting for that outrageous trade that comes your way. Someone knocks on the door and they're like, we're going to do this, and this for this player. And you're like, wow, we never would have thought that would happen. Should we consider it? A lot of times we do think that as team builders, as GMs and head coaches. Let's play it out. We'll have them in here for that week before we go into the beginning of the season. But let's see how long we can drag this to see if there's any opportunities out there. That would be my answer to something out of the blue like this. That would be, why didn't they do this earlier? Again, I want to say this. I am all about signing into training camp, right? I just think that is great for the team, meaning I would have loved it to happen early. But again, some people negotiate, some people team build, some people are businessmen in different ways. And of course, we know that, we know that's the situation in Dallas. Respectfully to them, they're always going to do it their way.
I think you're onto something there because it's the only thing that makes sense to me. Because you know the price only goes up. The price doesn't go down. So if you're going to pay them, I think that was what some of us were pulling our hair out. But I do think that you're probably not wrong. That if you know that everybody on every network television station is going to be talking about the Cowboys, good, bad, or indifferent, and you subscribe to there's no bad PR, then maybe this is good advertising for the team. Amon-Ra also got paid. So we've got a lot of wide receiver. I mean, the top of the wide receiver pay market has just completely flipped this offseason. A lot of guys got paid this year. For me, week 1 is the best week of the year because we just get so much information. There's so much information about who these teams actually are going to be and who might be better than we were thinking that they're going to be and who might be worse than we're thinking that they're going to be. And
that's right.
Which pieces might be used more frequently and might be the breakout stars this year. Like we're going to start getting some of the information that'll point us in the right direction. And so I'm really excited to have that conversation that's coming up on Thursday. Thomas, this has been fun. As always, getting to talk a little ball with you. And we'll be back again on Thursday to do that. Make sure that if you are not already subscribed to the SumerSports Show, hit that subscribe button. In some cases, it's like follow with a plus, and it doesn't actually say subscribe, so don't get confused. Do all of those things, and the next episode will automatically appear for you wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you then.